Well, it's how Christians have looked at it from the very beginning, that Jesus had two natures, a divine nature and a human nature. So simply, he had these limitations in his human nature while not in his divine nature.
You must have it such that Jesus is completely God and completely man at the same time. That is like saying that something is a square circle. You cannot be both, because to be human means to have limitations. To be divine means to have none. You cannot be limited and unlimited at the same time, unless you're schizophrenic, in which you have two different personalities here.
Okay, Michael, is Jesus schizophrenic? Let's answer that question.
Well, no. I mean, he was completely human in his human nature, and he was completely divine in his divine nature, and this is pretty clear throughout the New Testament.
This is probably the last video in the series about the Trinity, where I have shown that Dr. Craig formulates the Trinity in a way which is not consistent with ancient theology. A new interpretation of the Trinity is needed in order to make it theological. And here you see the word divine. You see, Christians are getting smarter and smarter. Instead of saying Jesus is God these days, they use the word divine. Now, words are very important, and how we use words are even more important. So, if a Christian says Jesus is divine, check what they mean by that. Today, I'm going to give you a different argumentation which is similar to the one Shabir Ali used, and I have heard other people use it as well, like Abdurrahman Green, and I will play his variation of this argument, which is similar to Shabir Ali's, in a moment.
To say that something is man and God at the same time, it's an impossibility to say that something, by definition, God is infinite, self-sufficient, and eternal. Human beings, by definition, are temporary, mortal, and needy. How can something be eternal and temporary both at the same time? How can something be self-sufficient and needy both at the same time? How can something be eternal and finite both at the same time? It's not a paradox. A paradox means something that seems impossible, but it's not. No, it is an impossibility by definition. Now, there are things that Christians say, God can do anything. Well, I mean, this raises a whole load of questions. God can do anything. I always say, well, do you believe God can do something evil? Now, either they will say, no, God can't do something evil. Or they'll say, well, he can if he wanted to, but he would never do something evil. I say, why not? They say, because God is good. God only does good things. I say, exactly. It is the nature of God. The nature of God is that God is good. And a good God does not do evil things. It is also the nature of God that God is eternal. So an eternal God doesn't become temporary. It's the nature of God that he is self-sufficient, free of any wants and needs. So God does not become needy, because that contradicts the nature of God.
Sometimes you might see people use shapes as an analogy for this situation. Basically, the shapes represent attributes. So a square represents an attribute of God. Now, to say that a square became a circle but still remains a square is a contradiction by definition. Now, the Christians sometimes respond in a very perplexing manner, and I'll give you a few examples. The most common example that I have come across is, well, you're using logic, and logic does not apply to God. How can you apply logic to God? And the response I usually give is, well, it seems to be okay when you're explaining God to me to use logic, but all of a sudden, when I show your logic is irrational and inconsistent, all of a sudden, logic is redundant and we can't use logic anymore. That's one of the responses. One of the other responses they give to this argument, I will show you in this clip. Sorry for the bad sound quality. It's really not my fault.
Yeah. Even the form of God worshipped by Muslims is called Unitarian. It is a Unitarian God. My God, being a Christian, is a Trinitarian God. So even by virtue of definition, we're not worshiping the same God. God cannot be a strict mathematical one and also three the three persons, three centers of consciousness within a single, complex, unified God.
This is a strange response because the God of Israel, the God that Jews believe in, right? Christians also claim to believe in that God. Now, I know Christians try to rationalize the Trinity in the Old Testament. Let's forget that debate for a second. Using this person's logic, right, the Jewish Unitarian concept of God is inconsistent with his Trinitarian philosophy. Therefore, as he dismissed the claim that the Muslims don't worship the same God, he can also dismiss the Jews and Christians don't worship the same God.
So that point is kind of weak. You do mention that circles and squares, a circle can't be a square. Well, actually, in the world of mathematics, a circle and a square, circles and squares are topologically equivalent. They can be proven that they are the same. Also, you forget about the world of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics don't make sense. The rules that apply there don't make sense in our realm because quantum mechanics deals with the very, very, very small subatomic particles. Einsteinian rules don't even apply there. So you can't really make that as a categorical statement like you did.
I asked one of my friends, how would you respond to this? And he gave me a crude response saying, well, duh. I knew exactly what he meant by this. Basically, the argument here is misrepresented, and appealing to topological equivalence, which I will explain a bit later, does not answer the argument or respond to it in a logical manner. And appealing to the apparent complexity of the quantum world does not actually answer the argument. The kind of topological equivalence the gentleman here suggested is the continuous deformation of one object into another in a context of a surrounding ambient space. A bit like what you see in this clip, but I'll explain it more precisely using circles and squares. This is a square. A square can be transformed into a circle without breaking it, but it cannot be transformed into a figure of 8 without breaking it. Hence, the square is topologically equivalent to the circle, but not topologically equivalent to the figure of 8. So when I say to you, the geometric definition of a square becomes the geometrical definition of a circle, but it still remains the geometrical definitions of a square, then that is not dealing with topological equivalence. Rather, it is a contradictory statement, because topological equivalence deals with transformations of one phase to another, where the second phase remains as its new geometric definition. If topological equivalence supports anything, it actually supports a Christian heresy known as modelism, which I discussed earlier in one of my videos. As Abdurrahman Green and Shabir Ali explain, to propose that Jesus is 100% God as a identity rather than a predication, and to say that Jesus is 100% man as an identity rather than a predication, is a absolute contradiction, because you cannot be limited and unlimited at the same time. One of the attributes of contradictory statements is that they have no truth value. They are meaningless statements. So if somebody says to you, Jesus is 100% man and 100% God, basically what they are saying is Jesus is blah, 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 blah. The following sentence blah, 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 is a string of words which have absolutely no meaning. Same as saying Jesus is 100% man and 100% God. Another example is this, to hit the message home, is if I say to you, my friend Ali, he is married and he is not married, i.e. a bachelor, at the same time, basically what I'm saying is my friend Ali and a string of sounds. I might as well be saying my friend Ali or my friend Ali. Those words, logically speaking, have no meaning. That's it. So next time, try out with your friend. When they say to you, Jesus is 100% God and 100% man as an identity, they're basically saying Jesus is